Good afternoon. I just wanted to create a video on non-verbal reasoning tips, and just to give you an idea on the types of and styles of questions that come up, as well as some tips on how to actually address and tackle these. Now, don't forget that they can come up with any type of non-verbal reasoning question in the exam, so this isn't a full list. There could certainly be the styles and types that come up. So let's crack on. Going to firstly matrix questions, and we'll look at these in a second, but basically there's three types: the sequences, reflections and rotations. We'll talk about each one in a second, but basically rotations and reflections can look very similar, but with practice you should be able to really tell the difference. And with all of these questions, I'll say this at the outset, but it applies to every single type of non-verbal reasoning question. Just look at one pattern at a time, and in the case of matrices, look left to right, by row, and then look top to bottom by column, and identify whether the pattern exists by rows and columns, or whether just by rows or just by columns. So let's start off with this type of question. Is it a sequence, rotation or reflection? Well, it's clearly a sequence, because you've got a pattern going on here whereby you've got, looking down the column, the same shape, the same shape, the same shape, and the trick is to look at the completed columns first. Let's just look at the left and the right hand side. So it's the same shape, so it tells us in the middle here that it's going to be either B, C or F. The next thing is to look at one dimension at a time, as I said, within the pattern you've identified. So you've got some dashed lines here, first of all pointing this way, then pointing this way, then pointing this way. So it tells you that the answer is C, because you've got the lines pointing in the opposite direction to both these outer shapes. So that's the key trick here: one variable at a time, and look at the completed rows or columns first. The columns and the rows. Okay. Next one, slightly different but still the same type of theme. Is it a sequence, rotation or reflection? Well, there's no reflection going on here, that's for sure. Is it a rotation? I don't think so, because you've got 3 pins there and 3 dots there and 1 dot there and 3 dots there. Can't really see any kind of rotation going on here at all, and different types of triangles and everything. So it's going to be a sequence. Is the sequence by row or is it by column? Well, first of all, can we see anything by column? Well, we can see 3 dots there, a triangle, and then a shape here. The key trick here is to look at the different types of patterns you can get. So here you've got 3 dots, then you've got 3 lines, and then you've got 5 lines. So it's just by practice really that you'll understand the different styles of questions. You've got a 3 and a 3, that gives you 6 sides, but that's not the case there, that's 5 sides. So is the pattern there by row? 3 sides, 3 sides, 6 sides, 3 sides, 1 side, 4 sides. So the sum of the dots and the lines gives you the pattern. Sum of the dots and the lines would therefore give you E. 5 sides plus 3 sides equals 8 sides. Next style of question, rotation, a sequence, rotation or reflection. It's not a sequence, and when you look at some patterns, you can see it straight away here that there's some kind of reflection going on. Imagine a line now drawn horizontally or vertically, and then that should form your mirror. Let's draw it horizontally, and you can quite clearly see that there's a mirror effect going on. You can see the pattern there, and again looking at the completed columns, the mirror there, 2 lines on the outside pointing in, 2 lines on the outside pointing in, the same there. Let's look at this pattern. Therefore you should have 2 lines. Should they be on the left or the right hand side? So you've got option C or D. Well, if the pattern holds, it should be C. Here, again identifying, is it a sequence, a rotation or reflection? Clearly not a reflection. I don't think there's a rotation going on, because you've got different types of shapes in each box. Therefore it's going to be a sequence. And again, look at the completed columns. Can you see anything going on here? It doesn't have to be one by one. It can be this one. It can be this one, and this one gives you this, or this one and this one gives you this. In that case, that's the solution. This top shape and this bottom shape gives you this in the middle. This top shape and the bottom shape gives you this in the middle. Therefore, there's only one answer in this, and that's E. And the reason why they've only put one possible option really, which stands out quite clearly, and there's no, these you can rule out quite quickly, is because you've got to have a knack to identify that this top and the bottom one gives you the middle one. Next, I've got some ones for you to try this, so pause the video and have a look in your own time. Again, sequence, rotation or reflection. Again, this is a sequence. There's not really anything in terms of rotation going on. It might look like it, but there isn't rotation going on. And the way you pick rotation is you imagine the shape, stick a nail in the middle and swivel it around basically by 90, 180, 270 and 360 degrees typically, or any type of angle. It can be, it doesn't have to be those angles. And if you swivel this around to get that, well, that's not right because the shape has changed, and therefore it's going to be a sequence. And what's happening here is the sequence by column or is it by row? Well, let's look at the completed rows. Really by column, sorry, I can't see any pattern going on here because you have got two shapes there and two shapes there, but there's nothing really about these two shapes that's the same as these two. Going across like this, what I do identify is that you've got a black, a white and a shaded. A shaded, a black and a white. So therefore you've got a shaded, this should be white and that should be black. So the answer is E. Next style, slightly different style of sequence where you've got two gaps to fill in. And you can see the pattern here. You've got a 2, a 3 and a 5. So you know this is going to be a 1 and a 2 dot, but the key trick here is to identify and ask yourself, why isn't it 1 dot there and 2 dots there and 3 dots there and 4 dots there and 5 dots there? So you've got to identify the second pattern. Remember what I said, it's one pattern in order at a time. First one is to identify that it's 1 dot in the first box, so it's either E or F. The next trick is to identify from what you can see what's happening. Why are those 2 dots moving there? Ask yourself why. And what's happening here? And then the 3 dots, something's happening there and it's becoming 5 dots there. What's happening here is you're getting that anti-clockwise movement, and that's typically what you'll get. You get a clockwise or an anti-clockwise movement. 2, 3, so the next one would be, well, let's start off with this one actually. In order to get there, you have to start there, so the answer is E. To give you 2 there, to give you 3 there, so the 4 wouldn't be there. Sorry, it would be there, not that side there, sorry, it would be there. So the 3 there becomes horizontal there, so you start off with E and you finish there with B. Here, a different type of sequence, 2, again, one pattern at a time. You've got 1 line, 2 lines, X number of lines, 4 lines, 5 lines. Quite easy to see, that'll be 3 lines and 5 lines. What's the other pattern? Black dot, white dot, black dot, white dot, black dot. So just one pattern at a time. So if this is 3 lines, is it B, C or D? Well, obviously it's going to be D because that's got the black dot. And then this last line here can really only be A, which is 5 lines and a black dot. A couple more for you to try there. Let's go to a reflection. And the way that I tackle these is I take the mirror and I look at the line closest to the mirror and just draw it myself, starting close to the mirror, pointing out. Therefore here, starting close to the mirror, pointing out. Oops. Close to the mirror, pointing out. So it's going to be a long line, starting there and going outwards. So it can't be A, it can't be C. D it could be, but the line's too small, and therefore it's B. A few more for you to try here. Of course, we could look, by the way, sorry, at the other patterns. If there was another line similar, another option similar to B, then we go to the next line and do the same. So I'm looking at line by line, just like I'd look at here when I was looking at one pattern at a time, sorry. Here, where I was looking at the lines and then the dots. Similarly here, I'd be looking at one line at a time. I just missed out a page there. Let me go back to that. So you've got 1 dot. You've got 2 types of dots here. I can't see any pattern in the direction of the circles, and the dots look pretty random in terms of where they're placed, apart from to say that the black dots are in kind of squashed in between these grey dots. But there's no pattern as to how these dots are changing as such in terms of clockwise or anti-clockwise. So I'm looking at the number of dots. There's no change in the size either. But there is a change in the number. 1 dot, X dot, X dot, 4 dot, 5 dots. So it's going to be 2 dots and 3 dots. So is it this or is it this for this first box? Well, what I've got is I can only determine that by then looking at these dots. And I'm saying I've got 9 dots here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That becomes 6 there and 5 there. So 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So it's going to be 8 dots there. So that can only be B, which is 8 dots. And then here, that's going to be 7 dots now, but with 3 black dots. So that can only be E. So B and E. This one we did, some more examples for you to try there, and sorry, one more example for you to try there. Here you've got the correlation and relationship between this pattern and that pattern. Big white circle, small white circle. Here I'm saying one pattern at a time. So therefore it's going to be a big white box, small white box, A, C or D. Black shaded on the right hand side, black shaded on the left hand side. Black shaded on the left hand side, so it's going to be black shaded on the right hand side. The answer is A. A couple more to try there. Rotation, imagine the pin stuck in the middle and rotate it clockwise. It can't be B or D because you've got two arrows there and you've got one arrow there which is not the same as this here. You've got a shaded arrow there, that's a white hollow arrow. So as you rotate it around, could it be C? Well, it can't be because the big arrow there rotates 90 degrees to the right. It's a small arrow there. So by deduction it can only be A, and if you were to rotate it all the way around you would see A as the answer. A couple of more examples for you to try there. Hexbugs and bugs, really a variation on the theme that we've seen before, and one variable at a time. Relationship between this becomes this. So what happens to this? Well, you've got black eyes, they become shaded eyes. So therefore black eyes become A, B or D. The legs and the actual body of this hexbug doesn't change. So therefore it can still be A, B or D. You won't always rule out an option as you go through the variables. This small shape is then surrounded by two hearts either side. So this big shape is going to be surrounded by two hearts either side. You've got that in A and C, but don't forget you've got black eyes there, here you've got slightly shaded eyes. So the answer is A. And you can have a look at this pattern yourself. Same principles apply. 3D shapes, the way to basically look at these is look at one feature at a time. And I always start off with a big tower. So which one of these rotated would give you one? A, B, C, D or F would rotate to give you this. Well, it's got a big tower, so it can only be B, D, E or F. The next thing that I'm noting is that it's got two towers there. A double cube, if you like, stacked. So it's got 3 cubes stacked, equivalent, and 2 cubes stacked. You haven't got that in B, so it can only be D, E or F. The next thing that I'm noticing is that you've got this really adjacent, if you like, the large tower to this set two block tower. That doesn't happen here. These are next to each other, so I'm ruling out D, so it's E or F. And then it's just a case of really rotating it until you see the pattern that you think it is. So if I rotate this clockwise 90 degrees, I see this, I don't see that, so the answer's A. And this one's a lot easier really. It can only really be A or C, and because of this little gap there, the answer is going to be C. A couple for you to try there. Here we're looking at a 3D shape. How does it look on a 2D view? So the way I look at these is I just imagine everything flattened and pushed down to the same level. This pushed down to the same level would give me a 2 by 2, so the answer would be B. This pushed down, slightly trickier one to look at, but you're looking at, if you like, one shape there adjacent to that, so it can only be A, B, can't be C or D, so I've ruled those two out. And then I'm looking at the next feature and I'm saying to myself, how deep is the picture? I can only see 2 cubes there. I can never see a 3 cube depth. That's a 3 cube depth. So therefore it can't be B. The answer is A. And then some more for you to try there. And then finally the cubes, again slightly tricky, but once you get into the thought process, you'll understand how to tackle these. The triangle there at the front, if I fold this inwards and fold this to make it into a Rubik's Cube, then that would be at the top, that would be at the bottom, that would be just underneath the triangle, if you like. That's on the left, that's on the right, and that's at the back of the cube. But then the triangle here is pointing to the front, so this would flip its way to the top, so it's A or B. I could go through the process and easily rule out C or D because I haven't got 2 black lines and I haven't got this white hollow line, but I've just stated the obvious there, that it can only really be A or B. If I fold this inwards and the triangle stays upwards like this, it can only be A because the white circle is on the left of this triangle, not on the right. So the answer is A. And you can have a go at this one in your own time. It's a similar concept, and the same with these. So that's a quick overview of non-verbal reasoning and tips Any questions, just catch me whilst we're having tuition, or just drop me a line. Thanks very much.